Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Chris Stone. I'm the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. Now, Nick, I mentioned the other week my university team that I coach had a dramatic last-second win to earn a playoff berth. And yesterday, Nick, my first time with the team in 7 years and the first time in the club's history, because it's only 8 years old, we have our first playoff victory, Nick. Very exciting.
Congratulations. Game. Congratulations. Was it a close one, or did you just go out there and dominate?
It was very back and forth. The final score was 28-18, which may be a scoreagami. Those that don't know scoreagami, it's when there's a unique score that's never happened before. But it was back and forth, 6-6 at halftime. We came out of the second half, scored, then they scored, then we scored, then they scored, and then we managed to get two more scores to finish it off. So it was intense. Came down to the fourth quarter, but I always like playing on the road, Nick. It's a nice little way, you get all the camaraderie. Everybody's on the coach together. So, yeah, it was good. It was fun. It was a beautiful, lovely day. The sun's finally out, shining in the UK. My players complaining that it was too hot. It was only about 10 degrees, but they were cramping. They were talking about it was too hot. And I was like, that only in Britain would it be too hot at 10 degrees.
Be careful what you wish for. Summer's coming. When do you finish the season? When's the end of it then? Do you obviously don't play through the summer, otherwise if they wouldn't be complaining about 10 degrees?
Yeah, no, well, we've got a bye week before the semifinals, and then it'll be another bye week for the finals if we make it to that. So March 30th would be the absolute latest. But so 2 more weeks. But yeah, like I said, it was a good day out with the boys. Good win for the team. Historic win for the team. My 180 kg bench pressing running back continued to have another day of just running through people. Just it is what it is. At some point they'll get tired of tackling you.
Are you favourites to win? Do you think if there was a bookie covering the division, the top division of British American football? I'm guessing there isn't a betting market officially. You're not talking about things you shouldn't be talking about.
Yeah, so I've seen at the men's level. So this is Uniball, but like the men's level, yeah. I have seen them on Sky Bet for the national championship game.
Wow.
So I've at least seen that happens at the highest level of the sport in the country. Not for us. Technically, it's an 8-team playoff. We're the 5 seed, so we technically upset the 4 seed, and we play the 1 seed this upcoming week. So.
Ooh.
If you go by that, they should be the top seed, but we play a very unique brand of football that we travel well is all I can say.
I would love to know how Sky Bet or those betting agencies sets the market for the top British American Football League. Have they got just their own dedicated team? Are they using just data, or is it just out of a hat? If anyone knows actually it's done, I'm guessing it's not done out of a hat, is my guess and speculation. That given some of the companies that I know that operated, like Sport Radar, Genius Sports, are big operators and behind the scenes powering a lot of these betting companies, they use an immense amount of data. I'd love to know what goes into the big sports. I get it. It's probably really intricate, but even just the smaller little sports, I'd love to know how that's approached.
No clue. All I know is I've only ever just seen it as a winner. Like they've not even offered a spread. And in the past, it's been pretty clear who the favorite is. So like your odds usually aren't particularly good. So it's not like some of the other ones where you got your different prop bets on yards and things like that. But all I know is I've seen it. I don't know if BAFA has official policy because I'm not 100% sure if some of my teammates may or may not have bet on it. But, that'll be something for the NGB to decide at an amateur sport level.
A slight connection actually with the business side now is DraftKings is obviously one of the dominant players in the US. They opened up internationally. I had a bit of a go with it. So it's a mix of for those that haven't used FanDuel and DraftKings before, at least my experience with them, I don't know if have you used them at all?
I'm not, Nick, for as much as I do in fantasy sports, I've never actually really got into sports betting, probably for the best, but I'm familiar with the platforms. Like I've used DraftKings for daily fantasy football sometimes during the football season where I might just put in like 10 quid on a game week and just like enter in a few lineups, but I've never actually used the platform for like any sort of prop bets or futures or anything.
Yeah, I've only done it for that as well, the daily fantasy style. I've never done it for just traditional betting, which is obviously where all the growth is in the US, because daily fantasy has kind of been around for actually quite a long time before. They found a nice little loophole to build out a business and industry there before it took off. But I was using the daily fantasy for a while and I just forgot about it. And I had won a little bit of money on there. It was sitting in the account. And then I get notified the other day that DraftKings is actually closing down its international operations, or at least in the UK. So, and it's telling me, get your money now before it's too late, basically, and otherwise you won't see that money again. So I better look into that, because I've forgotten all about it till we started talking about this. But I'm only talking about £50, so it's not a lot of money to worry about, but it's enough to make me want to get it back if it's mine. I do enjoy the daily fantasy stuff though. But if the British American Football League ever gets the BAFA ever gets into daily fantasy, then there's a whole other world going on behind the scenes that we need to learn a lot more about. That's for sure.
Yeah, we won't get too off tangent, but I saw an investor deck of someone that was trying to set up a professional UK football league, and they said one of their main revenue drivers when they operated the league was a fantasy league, and I was just like, oh boy, if that's listed as one of your top 3 ways of how the league is going to monetize, like I honestly couldn't tell you like the name of like 10 players that play in Britball. Like you're not going to.
And if you can't, what are they expecting? Yeah, I think there is. I've seen a few decks in my time, and there's a lot more naivety than high quality information that runs through those. That's for sure.
Yeah. So Nick, one of the things we're going to talk about before the episode is, the podcast now is well over 2 years old. We've got, I don't know the exact number, Nick, but we've got to be close to 200 episodes if we've not hit it already. We've been doing this quite a while. We've always been blown away with the support, the amount of LinkedIn messages, emails that we get.
And keep them coming.
Yeah, and keep them coming. But, one of the things that we want to do, particularly at Sports Pro, I think we talk about ourselves as, being a connective place for the industry and bringing together all sides of everything. And we feel the StreamTime platform, just based on some of the messages we get, the community there, is we've been looking for a way to try to contextualize that, bring it to life a little bit more. And we are starting a new program, initiative, membership, however you quite want to phrase it. But, Nick, maybe you want to tell the people a little bit about what we're doing from a StreamTime perspective, just to try to, bring even more benefits to people that are in our audience.
Yeah, completely. I mean, there's a couple of things to it, really. One of the other things we notice from all the events that we run across the world is that people like the opportunity that these events have, where you have all the people basically in the room together, and you start building relationships with all these interesting people, particularly our Madrid events, synonymous with that, with most of the people that have been coming year on year, build a whole abundance of relationships that they can lean into, and particularly use that event to reconnect and share what's been happening and get some inside knowledge, also what's going on in the industry. But the challenge for those big events is sometimes if you're not part of that ecosystem, or you're new to the game, it can be really difficult to make those connections and relationships. And in fact, a lot of people tell us that they really love those intimate settings where they can get together as well. And we sat down a little bit and talked about that. We talked about the fact that we get a lot of people who reach out to us and give us, their take and about what we're talking about on the pod, or share what they like about what we're doing, etc., which is great. But how do we take it a little bit of a step further? And I just think now in the sports media landscape, it's getting more and more complex every day. It just changed through the 2 years or so that we've been doing this. The topics have changed, the main players have changed, and indeed, we're just getting deeper into the thematics, and we have to take the conversation even deeper. So, yeah, we're looking to basically have really focus on a community, which I was almost hesitant to use the word because I hear used a lot these days. But we think that with StreamTime plus the Sports Pro events that we run across the globe in Madrid and New York and in London and so on, that we could go a lot further to super serve people who work in the sports media landscape, particularly from platforms, rights owners, and also some of the major tech companies in the space who are servicing it, because we think that intimate environment will foster and accelerate a lot of those relationships that we think are really important. So we're looking to do a host of new things, whether it be at our existing events, where we're running invite-only style lunches for those people as part of our new membership community. We're going to be running invite-only events that are capped in terms of numbers and the mix of people in the room, making sure there's an even balance of the basically platforms and rights owners alongside any of the tech businesses. So it's a nice, even, a really positive experience. Sometimes we'll be looking to do live podcast recordings and getting guests on stage, as well as us talking to other experts in the industry as well, and also leaning into that from a more of a content perspective that we currently doing now, whether it be through our newsletter and looking at other ways to bring connections and introductions to this membership community that we're creating. And we've already got a number of people who've sort of signed up behind the scenes, which are set to launch and announce shortly. But we're really excited by it. We think it's something that the industry needs. There is a lot of events, a lot of things going on, but we think something that's just dedicated to the sports media landscape, that is a little bit more behind the scenes, a little bit more closed door than the public facing stuff that we're doing, will be really valuable to those that are in it and people that we have got connections with, but even people we don't yet, who we really think they will value that to try and accelerate their position, understanding, and experience within this market. So we're quite excited about that. There's a lot more information that we can share. If you reach out to us directly, you can reach out to us on the various social media platforms. Find me, Nick Meacham, on LinkedIn, and obviously Chris Stone on LinkedIn as well, but also across Instagram and Twitter and the like. But also on our website, the sportspromedia.com website, go to the community section and check out StreamTime Sports, and there'll be more information there which you can check out and find out more. So I think that's in a nutshell. We're really, really excited about it. It's a commitment from us, basically, that we are going to try and super serve the people that listen to this podcast, but indeed just people who work in sports media at a senior level. We're really excited about it. It's going to be quite an interesting journey for us to balance all this alongside the events we do and the content we run, but we're really excited about how it's going to fit into the business and how it's going to hopefully bring the community a little bit closer together.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, just anecdotally running different workshops and forums we've done in the past, those always come back as feedback as being some of the most valuable ways that people spend their time at our events. So trying to do that more specifically for individuals within the StreamTime community audience, however you want to put it. Like I said, the feedback I get is that's the best 2 hours of my event day, is going to those things, on stage. People always kind of give you top level answers. They can't really tell you the details, or they might not want to tell you what's not going right. But these sorts of environments are just so invaluable for the types of things that you wouldn't normally get elsewhere at an event.
Absolutely. And look, this will be invite only. We'll be monitoring and curating who's allowed to join the group. We're not just going to make it a free for all, but we're really excited about that. And your points are really valid. So look, we're really excited about it. So if you want to find out more, reach out to us, and we can hopefully give you a bit more of a steer as to what we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned, Nick, it's a fast moving space. There's always things happening. And from the last time we kind of talked about the news, that story remains true as it always has. And, the last time we spoke, particularly focusing around the news, one of the stories we talked about was the potential that Major League Baseball and ESPN were going to break their long-term partnership. And since that time, that has in fact taken place. But then we've also seen the Premier League has ended its deal with Fox Sports Mexico. We've also heard rumors that DAZN and Ligue 1 are potentially looking at splitting ways. And then I've also heard rumors that potentially the NFL, and their very expensive, very long-term contracts, they can technically end those in 2029, which, it seems a long way away, but obviously lots of things will happen in the background that would lead up to something like that. But there's even rumors of the NFL, with the expansion of Netflix getting involved, that they might want to get out of their current deal a little bit earlier. And I guess, Nick, we can talk about some of the individual, breakdowns of those. But if we take a step back and we just look more generally, is this just happenstance that all of these sort of cancellations are kind of happening at the same time, or do you think this is part of a larger trend across the media space?
It's super interesting. I do feel like this is linked with something that is a bit bigger. I think it's linked with the fact that most broadcasters and streaming platforms today are more risk adverse than they perhaps were. And so these rights agreements exist probably initially because of the broadcasters and platforms saying, hey, we want to get out of this, is not working for us, rather than make this huge financial commitment and be stuck with it for several years from now. Because also the sports properties, the rights owners, the ones saying, hey, you want these rights, you're going to have to commit for a long period of time. We want security. We want to know what we're going to be able to fund our key stakeholders financially with. If you look what's happened in Ligue 1 is a great example. What happens if that rug gets pulled out of you in short notice? Things go up shit creek, basically, for want of a better expression. So there's that surety thing that everyone wants. So everyone wants it, from the broadcasters, the streamers. They want that surety of knowing they've got a long-term investment to build, an asset to build effectively, rather than just be a liability, and that the sports properties have someone to work with longer term. But they commit these long-term agreements with these exit clauses that haven't historically either been utilized or realized because there wasn't a lot of other levers to pull, or the pace of the marketplace wasn't as rapid and as fast moving as we sit in today. Like Netflix's investment into the sports rights space didn't exist 12 plus months ago, and now they're considered likely one of the premier buyers of rights in many different ways, or expected to be as such. So yeah, I think it's just a volatile market. I think it is a place where people are willing to take short-term bets, but they aren't willing to take those long-term ones unless they are absolutely certain they are onto something as a long-term winner. And most of the major premium rights do go for a premium that has to, I guess, deliver huge upside over time. Almost everyone's going into this not with like, hey, we're buying these rights at the value they are today, with a view that they're going to be still valued the same in a few years' time. We are expecting to build the value for us and for you over this period. And if they're not seeing those things happen, then they want to get out of those deals naturally. So it's a super interesting predicament, I think, that the marketplace is, because there's also all these other layers of entertainment that broadcasters and platforms are able to get their teeth into now. And who's pulling that exit clause? The conversation around Ligue 1 and the DAZN deal was that Ligue 1's and their teams were the ones that really pushed for this exit clause, because they were hoping maybe a new bidder might pop up all of a sudden. Maybe Netflix will be like, all right, now we're going to come into the French market. Well, actually, now it looks like DAZN are the ones going to pull that lever if things play out as reported. Typically, these clauses are built, and then they might be mutual, but they normally always skew one way. But even in this instance, in a matter of 6 months, it's completely flipped 180 on what it was there for. So super interesting time in this industry to see if this continues to be a trend, and to hear even people like the NFL already threatening to pull exit clauses 4 years out before that time comes.
Before jumping back into the stream time content, I wanted to thank our partner for this podcast, Placer AI. Are you ready to take your venue to the next level? Placer AI's location intelligence can change the game for your sports business. Whether you're managing a stadium or looking to boost fan engagement, Placer AI's real-world insights help you to analyze performance and drive visit growth. With Placer AI, sports organizations can understand key fan profiles, benchmark against competitors, maximize sponsorship value, identify new revenue opportunities, and prove advertising value. Placer AI is the best-in-class accurate location analytics for professional sports venues and events. Learn more at placer.ai. Yeah, it's interesting, and I think one of the other things is, your LinkedIn post about it had lots of comments, and I think it's just there's no answer on it. There's some people that are like, oh yeah, this is common, these things have always existed, like it's just the market acting the way it is. And then there's other people being like, yep, it's just proof that the whole thing's falling apart, it needs to be rebuilt. So it was just interesting. Like I said, I think there's 30 comments on there, and there's definitely some people that agree, but then there's some people that are just on the other side, and no one seems to quite know what the answer is. So I find it interesting that everyone's kind of acknowledging it's going on, but there is no one size fits all or where this is all going to end up either.
I'm going to use a terrible, terrible line I heard this weekend, which is from Donald Trump against Zelensky in his tirade against him in the White House. It all depends on who's got the cards, and if you don't have the cards, then you can't dictate the terms as well. It really irks me saying that, because I won't go into get political on that, but basically the point is, though, the industry is, I think most people who aren't involved with media rights do not understand how much it is built on almost a mix of like the traditions of basic supply and demand economics, and all these little negotiation levers you can pull and play to try and pull the power and the control and the price your way, and whilst the other partners are trying to pull it their way. And I think we saw a real dip and a real problem in the market a few years ago. And it feels like we have had a bit of resurgence in the interest of media rights as a whole, but those media rights come with conditions. So we are seeing some really impressive deals, like Netflix is particularly sort of reset that marketplace a little bit, but they are coming with the possibility that someone might pull out, and that didn't really exist for quite some time, with a few exceptions, which is, I think, was pointed out online. So I think it's so much of like the art of the deal in media rights negotiations. and the reality is those tier 2, tier 3 sports don't have a lot of cards to play. They can try and say things, but ultimately it's only the tier 1s that have got cards that they can pull. And those that do then can make it really difficult for those broadcasters to set the terms and conditions. And that is massively down to the expertise of the negotiators, the deal makers, the media rights salespeople that exist, who are, if you meet them all, there's a common theme. They're super personable, but they're very balanced. They just know how to read those situations so well. And it definitely takes plenty of artistry if you're in those types of roles. That's for sure. That's my point I'm trying to get to. Basically, it isn't just as simple as basic supply and demand economics. Is also how people are able to approach those situations, and there are some real smart operators in the space. Is basically my point.
Yeah, well, I think one of the interesting points, or at least the way I interpreted the way it was reported, particularly looking at the Major League Baseball and ESPN one, was Major League Baseball talking about the minimal coverage from ESPN. And we've talked in other cases about like Formula One, who we will talk about immediately after this little segment here, was, it was reported that Formula One chose ESPN over Amazon because of what ESPN provides as a broader media coverage, whether that's SportsCenter, all their other shows, what they do from a written content perspective, the social media coverage. So I found it notable that, Major League Baseball was sort of essentially saying like, hey, we didn't feel like we were getting enough value from ESPN as a partner, when I feel like the argument has been made the other way around, that you could actually take less money by being with ESPN because you're going to get all these other benefits that were baked into it.
Yeah, I found that a super interesting comment as well, given all the stuff we have talked about before around that. And my guess is they are still probably getting extra coverage, but they are not getting the extra coverage of their counterparts. So the NBAs and the NFLs and the college football and all those ones they're trying to compete with, and the WNBA, particularly over the last 18 months or 2 years with Caitlin Clark and her ascendancy. So they are struggling to get the airtime apps that they want in comparison to people they're trying to compete with for fandom. And I think there's some validity to that, but it is all relative. I still do believe that they're probably getting a lot more of it out of the platform. But maybe with how social media and YouTube's playing such an important role now in sports media, maybe that's starting to fill that void a little bit. You don't need to be as visible on some of those platforms, perhaps, if that's countered with appropriate strategies around social and other platforms, whether it be also your own strategy or the use of creators and other media outlets to bring all that to life. I'm not really sure where it sort of goes for here, but I do think it's just an interesting predicament, because that used to be, as your point is, ESPN's special sauce, basically, that they would be the only ones to keep you in the ongoing conversation year in, year out, at least at the national level in the US. And if that's not something that they're being considered as doing, then they do lose some of that negotiation power we just talked about.
It's definitely feasible and it's definitely possible. And I've, kind of used this anecdotal story before. I watch more sports content than I've ever done recently, but I live in the UK. I don't get ESPN. Everything I do, like YouTube is my main source. There's so many different, other podcasts that I watch / listen to in the background. There's absolutely a way to connect with people. And I think, to your point, I know everyone, ESPN is ESPN. I don't want to take away from ESPN and say they're not a giant that they are. But like, there's definitely a way that, it could be overstated. We talk all the time about, linear TV not necessarily being quite what it was before. Not saying you want to lose ESPN, but like I said, anecdotally, whether it's via YouTube, creators, social media, like, there is a place for people to consume that content if you have a strategy behind it, instead of just relying on ESPN to just be the engine for you.
Yeah, completely. I think the tricky bit that baseball has, and I don't know how to articulate this in the best way, but my view on baseball, which may be naive, and Chris, you'll be able to help me here, is it's very localized. Yeah. It's very localized in terms of its fandom and its follower base in a lot of markets. So the reliance on like national outlets like ESPN to bring it to the fore in a sport that's played 56 games in the regular season? 162 games in the regular season plus playoffs. Like, I can understand why when you get to business time and the playoffs come, then people start to pay more attention. But then the expectation can't be, what you want ESPN to find all these stories out of 160 games. What stories can you find? You can find certain moments of when records might be broken or big plays might happen. But if they're the wrong teams, they're not going to be appealing to at a national level. And so that's where the reliance has to be on local partners to tell those stories rather than the big ones. That's my expectation. And I do think ESPN worked hard to tell the stories about the fact the new shot clock or the pitch clock had a positive impact, and those things were helping the sport become more favorable to consume and to watch on the live broadcast, and even go watch live, because if the games weren't 4 hours anymore, or they were down to like 2.5, I think was the number. I'm not sure if that's the right split, but yeah, it's just difficult to tell stories that really actually have resonance for a big national market if you've got 162 games plus playoffs. So potentially, the Dodgers have played 200 games in the last year. Oh, that's insane numbers, right? So how can anyone who's not a top tier fan pay any attention to that team through traditional outlets if they've got all this other stuff that's going on that has like recency value, like the NFL, which is still, even if it adds another week game, it's only 18 games a season. You build that momentum to that one moment you can follow, not have to be always on 10 months of the year, 9 months of the year, whatever the hell on the season is. It's just, I don't know how they could ever fix that, because you can say shorten the season, but that won't work in practicality, not economically. So I just find it a bit of a conundrum to find stories constantly, day in, day out, for 9 months of the year or however long a season might be.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's a pretty accurate take in terms of the just the regionalization from it. So I can't really disagree with anything you've said there. And I to your point, it's not too dissimilar to the NBA. Everyone gets sick and tired. Like, why do you only talk about LeBron James? Well, to your point, Major League Baseball and the NBA are probably more reliant on RSNs than they are necessarily national deals in terms of like reach. That might not be where they're getting all the money, but from a reach perspective. So yeah, LeBron gets talked about because he's the one person. Doesn't matter which team you're in, you either like him or you hate him, and you're going to talk about him. And it's the same thing with Ohtani and the Dodgers. Whether you like him or hate him, he's the one person that every team will talk about, and that's just sort of the nature of it. Unfortunately, it doesn't have. They are more star-driven leagues than perhaps other sports, and that I think you're pretty spot on with that regional limitation to what a national brand like ESPN can do.
The reality on social media is it actually reflects pretty similarly. Who you're most likely to see more clips of? LeBron James and Ohtani and those types of characters, because more people share their stuff, not just the main media outlets. So I think there is a bit of a reflection there that is aligned with, unfortunately, mainstream market interest levels. So that is the tricky bit that I don't know how you overcome that. I know the speculation with the MLB's instance, and we talked about last time, does an Amazon make a more localized approach and play for it? I'd love to see someone commit to that, really, and go proper localized in how they market and bring all those rights to life. But that's a tricky ball game to play at that sort of frequency.
Yeah. Well, speaking of people potentially taking a different direction, we have rumored about it before with Formula One looking to leave ESPN. Those stories seem to be only picking up heat, and sort of the most recent news was they're looking to get $160 to $180 million per year, which would double the deal that they currently have with ESPN. So, kind of the rumors are ESPN does not want to necessarily be involved in a bidding war. F1 is hoping Netflix might be the one to step in. Netflix will be what Apple was or what Amazon was 3-4 years ago, where they're just the name everyone's going to attach to everything. But yeah, it looks like this wouldn't be canceling a deal because the deal would be over, but perhaps canceling a relationship. Nick, I think you maybe heard some news or heard some gossip or just have some general thoughts sort of on where Formula One actually thinks their valuations are and what they might actually end up getting.
Yeah, I heard that the numbers that they're broadcasting or pushing out publicly is to basically double their revenue from last cycle, and I've heard through a few sources that that's going to be more likely somewhere about 50, a bit over 50% is what they're seriously actually aiming for. But it's one of those kinds of things: set the bar a little bit high and negotiate down, so people think they get a deal if they make the deal. But they are already actively talking to a lot of other players in the market to try and see if they can come up with something. And I do think that F1's just got to really interesting proposition for a broadcast partner because of what we talked about, I think, a few weeks back with regards to the seasonality bit, the events-based approach that they have. So you can build up to these races on every Sunday. It's a bit like the NFL experience a little bit in terms of the traditionality of
qualifying as well.
Yeah, all those moments that you don't have to watch them all, but if the bigger the fan you are, the more likely you are to consume those things. And I think that's a little bit like how the NFL can work because of the weekend. You've got the games on traditionally on a Sunday, and people build up to that and know what they're going to watch in the build up. So I think F1's got a unique offering from that perspective that I'm sure will be interesting to a whole host of broadcasts. The question is simply just at what price? At what price are they worth? And the tricky bit is I looked at some of the data on our website. So for people, I realized this the other day, Chris, but most of the stories we talk about are all on the Sports Pro Media website. We very rarely mention that fact. So if people are wanting to keep abreast of what's going on, we do highly recommend accessing and signing in up to the website. You can sign up for free to access a lot of the news-related content, but more premium services are available on sportspromedia.com. But it includes access to a lot of our data. And some of the data I looked at from F1's perspective was that actually when they did the last deal with on Formula One with ESPN, they had a huge uplift in audience. It basically doubled in about 2 years. But then since then, the ratings have actually started to dip slightly from an average race perspective. And you could point to a lot of reasons and speculate as to why. That could be because fandom might be waning. It could be because the racing hasn't been as competitive, which is, I think, most people who follow F1 would say so. Or is it the bubble just kind of burst? Whatever the case may be, the ratings have not doubled since after that deal was done. They doubled from just before the deal was done. So for context, so they've actually started to show a negative trend that you wouldn't think would appeal to a lot of media rights investors to then pay over the odds for them. So it's going to be just interesting to see. There's a lot of reasons why someone would want to spend even more than that on something like F1 in a market like America if they have the right races and the right drivers and the right timings from a scheduling perspective, whether it be, I could see the NBC and Peacocks of the world who can leverage those rights through different platforms. I think that's super important. So when, I think something that ESPN do is when they have the US-based races, the races in Texas and Miami, they put them on ABC and get heightened audiences or on ESPN's linear offerings to try and expand that. And I think someone like an NBC would make a logical sense in that instance. I could see CBS or Paramount, who's been focused on different audience segments, making a bid for them. And of course, Apple again and Amazon, of course, could make a play if they're going to be back into the game there. But I feel like with someone like Amazon, that ship has sailed on making a play for F1. Netflix is obviously the one that everyone looks to now because of what they've said and what the history with Drive to Survive. And to be clear, what they've said is they like events-based style media rights investments in sports. So that being, I think, F1 fits into that quite well. So there's a good time for them to go back to market, I would just say.
Yeah. Well, it's a story we'll follow. Their deal with ESPN is expiring soon, so all of that will heat up. It'll be one of those that we come back to, and we'll see if it's some of the stories have been true in terms of what the value might be or who some of the players are, but it's definitely one that we'll keep an eye on.
I just want to add to that one small thing is that actually Liberty's numbers revenue-wise has continued to grow. So this deal isn't make or break for them. It's an important media partner they have. They want to continue the momentum. It's a nice increase in revenue. But the main thing is they do have to find the right partner with the right balance. And ESPN doesn't look like it'll be there. They might still make a last-minute bid at a lower price point, but it doesn't seem like a war. They need to make sure that someone gives them the right mix to hit all different types of fans, and that I'm super interested to see if they commit to that logic because they are driving revenues up in other places.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of StreamTime Sports. This episode is brought to you by our partners at Kanto. Content is the MVP of the sports world. Whether it's engaging fans, building brands, or driving revenue, it's a game changer. But keeping up with the demands of instant platform-ready content, that's a tough play. Enter Kanto. Kanto's industry-leading digital asset management platform calms the chaos of managing sports content. From AI-powered searching of matchday photos and rapid creation of B-roll videos for social media, to giving sponsors, players, and agents quick, easy access to branded assets, Kanto keeps your team focused on the action. Just ask Maserati Racing, NASCAR, or British Fencing. They've streamlined workflows, boosted fan engagement, and strengthened sponsored relationships with Kanto in their corner. Ready to level up your content game? Visit Kanto.com today. Well, we are going to have our Black Book Motorsport editor, Kean Brittle, on an upcoming episode to talk more about motorsports. So he'll definitely, I think, probably be able to provide a bit more context, being deeper into that space
Absolutely.
than we will about their audiences and some of those sort of demographics that you're talking about. So that's something that will be coming up in an upcoming episode. But one of the other interesting stories, another one that got some coverage on your end, Nick, and it's interesting because when we last spoke about the news 2 weeks ago, we talked about a disruptor basketball league, being led by Mav Carter and, some funding from Saudi Arabia. But DAZN, who continue over the last few months making moves and acquiring businesses and launching different elements of their platform, have now, they're moving forward with launching a dedicated global basketball division, which, seems like a very interesting move for them, given some of the other news as you're hearing around, even with FIBA and EuroLeague and things like that, to try to become a home of basketball internationally. We've seen them do that a little bit with the NFL, taking the global deal for NFL Game Pass. I would love to see them do something with college football as well, just become the international home of football as a sport in general. But it looks like they're going to try to do something like that with basketball. There'll be some other interesting things in terms of just, the NBA, WNBA have rights in place. The NBA's launched their own D2C app, but obviously we've seen that DAZN doesn't care if you have your own owned and operated platform. They'll just simply put it into their own. That's not going to stop them. But just what do you make of this news of DAZN launching a dedicated basketball division?
I think it's very interesting for a couple of reasons. One is if you reflect on, I think most people, you could ask a lot of people this question, but what is the most popular sport in the world? I would say football or soccer. What is the second most? And most would probably point to basketball as the number 2 sport. I haven't seen a lot of metrics that would definitively say it is recently, but I think that's still consistently viewed as such. Yet the servicing of basketball-related content, live matches, etc., is still pretty undercooked in comparison. It's not as mature as, say, the football space is. And in some markets, probably like smaller to mid-sized countries, typically basketball is put on a bit of a pedestal in those markets. They get real good coverage, primetime viewership in some sort of smaller countries, but generally it's not as watched in the same vein in the same way as football. That's a generalization, but in general terms, that is kind of the mix. But there is a lot of great leagues that exist across the world and a lot more interest than ever in global basketball because of the success of the international players, particularly in the NBA, who imagine if everyone could have just turned on to the EuroLeague comfortably at a flick of a button, not had to go find it, and watched Doncic just before the draft was coming to hear what he was all about, or Wembanyama, which is what the NBA tried to do by acquiring the French league's rights in the season before, so people could actually see and watch some of their games prior to him being drafted. So I think the opportunity to connect the basketball world, I suppose, or basketball fans, to give them access to both the NBA product and all these other really good leagues, including the EuroLeague and the 1891 Courtside Ventures proposition, which is pretty much all of FIFA's international games, and have that all in one place, I find a really compelling proposition that would be awesome if it could be brought all together. The catch is, or the question is, can that actually be achieved? So DAZN has the 1891 platform. Again, that is a partnership between Courtside Ventures, which is basically run by Two Circles, and FIBA, where they brought this proposition together, and they've since sold those rights off to DAZN, who basically have built the platform in their own environment and have a very similar approach to the NFL in Game Pass International approach. The question is, can they do that with the NBA as well? If they can somehow secure the NBA's rights and make this one-stop shop for basketball with all of the FIBA-related material, and then start to bring in other major leagues. They've got the British basketball, or the British Super League, I think it's called, which isn't much of a league at the moment. I think it's still trying to work out what it is, given the last sort of stuff I've seen, but is trying to get itself into a good place. If you could see those second-tier, third-tier leagues across the world easily being plugged into this, and next to no cost for someone like DAZN, who could probably open up a host of different media rights deals from different markets to tap into international audiences that they would want, I think that becomes a really compelling proposition. I'll dig into it in a second, but I realize I'm talking way too much. But is that NBA deal ultimately achievable, given the relationship they've got with people like Amazon? That's ultimately the question I don't know enough of. I've actually had some people reach out to me on it, but that's the question mark that will determine whether that's actually achievable at that scale with the NBA.
Yeah, well, I think the other interesting side of it is just I actually don't know enough about how well the NBA's owned and operated platform is doing internationally, and it makes me think the NFL being the most apples to apples example, having Delta Trade previously run the platform, and then having Two Circles help market it, but it was all owned under the NFL umbrella. Did they finally decide that DAZN was going to offer enough money that yeah, we'll actually let you be the ones responsible for the platform development, for the marketing, driving subscriptions. Like, we just don't want to deal with it anymore. I know you mentioned Amazon having access to the NBA platform, and it's just whether it's just a matter of DAZN has to offer enough money to the NBA. They're like, hey, fine, like happy with just like handing this over. And I think we've even talked about this. OTT platforms can be a manner of negotiation, right? Like, I don't need to go to a broadcaster if my OTT platform's working, but what's that inflection point with which the cost is good enough to say actually it means less work for us and we're happy to do that?
That's the thing. We talked about exit clauses before. We don't know all the devil in the detail there. But one thing, Amazon does have the rights to, obviously they became a huge investor into the NBA and brought that into their next major investment in US rights. As part of it, I had Tom Reed, who's the chief commercial officer at Spork, reach out and sort of give me a bit more detail. I think Spork do, unless they've evolved their business more recently, they do a lot of the they provide a lot of commentary services for sports, particularly global. So if you're running a global sporting event, they will be able to help basically connect you with remote commentary in simple terms and other services there, which I think is a really cool service. But he reached out to me just to give me some his take on some of the numbers, which I thought was handy, because he definitely seems to have more of an inside line than I do on terms of the deal makeup, and that was that it is exclusive in terms of being on their platform, being integrated into Prime. So it was almost like, was that a bit of a counter to the DAZN relationship? But again, to your point, could DAZN basically say, look, we're going to pay you NBA for this. Can you rebate some of that to Amazon, and in return we get the access to the global rights? I'm sure that's possible. I'm sure there's a lever that can be pulled if they really were willing to put enough money on the table, or that they do a deal with Amazon Prime to get those rights off of them, and they would just need the approval support of the NBA to do it. So I think there is a few ways. These things can always happen. They can always be done if they want to be done and the price tag is willing. DAZN paid 2 to 3x, from what I heard, more than the other parties were willing to take the Game Pass in their platform. But they did that so they could then start doing more and more of these types of deals and more partners. WRC is another one that they've done it with as well. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But I just love the prospect of it. I love the prospect of having a single football destination. I love the idea of the basketball destination. It would just be something I think would be really appealing to fans right across the world.
Well, talking about single destinations, everyone's talking about it, not just the NBA, not just the NFL, but Todd Boehly, the owner, I'm not exactly 100% sure how they phrase that with Chelsea. I think he is technically the owner, but he's part of the Clear Lake group, and Chelsea operating in a completely different way to everybody else. But Todd Boehly always has big ideas for how the Premier League can make more money. I know a lot of people hated on the idea of his North versus South All-Star game, which I was like, you play all these preseason friendlies, why not have an All-Star game? Who wouldn't want to, whatever, let people fight about it. But he has recently come out and said that, and I think Richard Masters, the CEO of the Premier League, had a recent speaking opportunity, and that's sort of where some of this stuff is sparked off, talking about that the Premier League is inevitably headed towards a global streaming deal. He just believes that is where they are headed as an organization. He says that means owners are going to have to take some risk, because, that obviously breaks from the model that they've essentially been operating on for as long as I can remember. So, Nick, we've talked about the Premier League, what they should do, talking about the 3 p.m. blackout, talking about, accessibility to sports. This is not necessarily a new topic, but, Todd Boehly, very, very wealthy man, has some influences saying that, the Premier League isn't inevitably headed down this direction of a global streaming platform. So, what's your take, Nick?
Well, I think they are too. I think they have to be now. I think the dynamics of the market have changed, and I think some of the undercurrent, like living where I lived for the last year in Jamaica, one of the things that stood out to me there, and I have talked about it, I think maybe a while ago now, is that to get access to all the games, like there is a huge amount of fandom in a market like that, and I'm sure this is replicated in dozens and dozens of markets, if not over 100. Is that fandom to some of the Premier League clubs is so high, but the only way they can watch the games that they want to watch is currently through pirated means because they're not easily accessible in a lot of ways, or at least not easily accessible in the way you would expect or hope they are. But just say some of those rights that aren't being sold, you've got that tier of rights of, let's say, a sprinkling of match of the week, let's call them match of the week or matches of the week that could be sold off. But then the bulk of those 380 games could easily be mopped up by someone who's not willing to pay for it. Again, I'll use the Jamaica example. There's Digicel, which is the primary telco out there, was one of the investors, lost some of the rights to the Premier League when someone else popped up as an OTT provider. But OTT adoption in markets like the Caribbean is obviously not as high as others because of telco challenges. And someone like Digicel still has a base layer of games being broadcast on the platform, but you're talking a fraction of what the league is being played. So you can't watch the games you want to watch. So that's a replicable situation for dozens and dozens and dozens of markets. So the notion that it could just be dropped into an Amazon or a Netflix and that could be the future home, that you just know that they're going to have every game available. Or, of course, the idea of that the Premier League has its own OTT platform and they just point people there. But we know that a tier one sports property like the Premier League will always get a better than the odds deal to be picked up by a major platform like Netflix in this instance. And that's it seems like it's almost inevitable. It's almost too obvious a fit to really take some of the edge of the piracy issue and start serving audiences better in the way that they should be serving them and haven't been for quite some time.
Well, we are going to talk piracy after this, but I think one of the places Todd Bowley's argument is going to struggle with a little bit is the Premier League is unique to any other sports league in the world that we know of, in the sense of when the NFL signs that global deal, or we're talking about potentially, the NBA signed this global deal, those two sports and pretty much every other sport make the primary amount of their revenue from domestic deals. The Premier League, as far as I'm aware, is the only sports league that makes more money internationally than it does domestically. And, Richard Masters specifically highlighted they achieved 27% increase in their international growth commercially. So the issue with that is I think some of these other people that have taken this global home strategy is because that was just kind of the best thing available for them. But the Premier League it's flipped the other way. Now, it makes money from Sky, don't get me wrong. It makes money in the UK, but it's the only one that can say that it makes more money internationally. And I just don't know if that global, while I would love the idea of it, just as a fan, I can understand from a business perspective why the Premier League might say, like, this is not an apples to apples comparison to some of these other major organizations that do have these single destination homes to watch their sports on a streaming platform.
Completely. I just think that the question that I don't have the answer to, and I would love to see if anyone has any solid data on this, but there must be some market by market research done around fandom. So if you look at, let's say, different markets in Asia, where does the Premier League and the clubs sit on that fandom scale? And if you do that in a bunch of different markets and you go, all right, well, actually, the EPL is sitting at maybe Sport 2 or Sport 3 or Sport 1 in some of those instances because of the power of their social media influence and the fandom that exists through non-traditional means, let's say, as well as through the traditional means with broadcasters. They have got that sort of, that social currency that many sports don't have, and it's actually at a truly global scale. So to be able to sell that, I think it is a unique selling point. But it's going to cost an absolute arm and a leg for someone to commit to mop up all those rights at scale. So I think Todd pointed out the obvious here, which is it's going to take some risk in playing that game. It's going to take a step outside the norm. The fact that the Premier League's also taken on production in-house gives them the flexibility to do that deal quite comfortably and just basically hand over or sell the rights in one nice big box to some of these major streaming players rather than having to rely on them to produce it all. It does just feel inevitable, doesn't it? That they, at least at some sort of scale, they could offer that as a truly global package with its very few exceptions, other than say the US, where it's with its NBC and Comcast partnership, that would be something they would have to really be challenged to make the move.
Yeah, it feels like for me with the Premier League, it's more what do you do at the 3 p.m. kickoff? And then how do you just make more games? I feel like jumping straight to that global streaming platform, you might actually be jumping a few steps on some other things that I think probably need to be like, I don't think you can, I mean, they can, but like, it feels like there's some other question marks about some of their existing deals or the components that make up those deals before you jump all the way to there. Now, granted, we're talking global versus domestic, and a lot of this is domestic related, but I think they're you can't just pull them apart either.
Yeah, I do think that you need to separate the conversation for now from international versus domestic, and I'm talking out at an international level. The domestic problem is that Sky's paying such a premium for those rights. That is someone willing to mop up the domestic rights as well and take away all the investment, the exposure that Sky brings to the table, and just the solid audience numbers that they continue to deliver. That's a much bigger commitment that someone would have to make. I mean, Comcast has not got it easy at the moment. Comcast owns Sky in a bunch of markets. There's been rumors that they've been up for sale for some time. That another logical possibility could be that Sky might be mopped up by a major big tech company at some stage down the line. If that was to happen, then again, it would just be ingested and integrated into those platforms rather seamlessly. But that feels like that's a much bigger predicament or situation if someone's willing to make that sort of move. I think what you're more likely to see is that they do something internationally, and that's the starting point. They keep with Sky for the medium term, and then maybe something happens down the line. But I can't see it all being happening at the same time with domestic and international being all brought up at one stage. It doesn't feel like it's achievable.
Yeah. Well, the last bit for today, and sticking on the Premier League, purely because I love talking about piracy. I think it's just a fascinating topic. I will continue to say it. Is I believe in that same sort of meeting where there's commentary being made. Sky's chief operating officer, Nick Herm, basically said that Amazon is not doing enough to combat piracy. We've seen numbers about the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, every year reportedly lost to piracy. And that's not to, dismiss it. This isn't me trying to make light of the topic. And I remember Steve and I spoke about this, who's responsible for piracy, and got some strong feedback, saying like, hey, you're actually downplaying piracy. And I think it's a fascinating topic, but one of the issues, at least here in the UK, and I can see it in our writing, it has now been dubbed as the dodgy Fire Stick, which is produced by Amazon, was originally intended to be a way to just make connected smart TV experiences more possible by just having an HDMI port. And essentially the pirates have figured out that you can actually use those devices to get around it and build your own streaming platforms on there, and have every Premier League game. And I think the numbers were something over 50% of all pirated streams they report are coming from the Amazon Fire Stick. And see the COO at Sky essentially saying Amazon needs to take a bigger step in that. And like I said, this goes back to the question I had with Steve when we had a whole podcast on this: is who's responsible? Is it the rights holders, the Premier League, to stop it from the start? Is it the broadcasters that have paid for those rights? Is it the tech businesses? Is it the government? And it's just this whole sort of whack-a-mole. Who's in charge of this?
Now, when I saw this headline, I did wonder, gosh, I really hope Sky's only just realized that, has not just realized that this is a problem, because I think if you ask anyone that I know that everyone knows that these things exist, these Fire Stick sort of things, and they're commonplace that people can buy them on a whim off of various platforms. Obviously, they're illegal. Obviously, they are not the ideal scenario, but it comes back to the root cause of the problem. So I wouldn't even go down the line of even opening up the Pandora's box on who's responsible to manage it. I would say the problem is the model still, unfortunately. We all know that the problem is the model. And so these broadcasters, I think this is a point that is contentious with a lot of people, have to just deal with the fact there is a loss of revenue with the models that they play today. And that's why because piracy is going to continue to exist, unless they take a different approach, which we've been talking and advocating a lot around advertising, opening up the floodgates, not having it behind paywalls, and making it accessible for everyone, and just monetizing it through that way is best you can. Now, I can say that. It's super easy to say that. There's a reason why we haven't got to that point yet. But it does feel like that's the only way this will ever not become a subject anymore, is that sports just has to find a way to maximize the value of monetizing live sports through advertising and not hiding them behind paywalls and just sucking out the revenue out of those top tier fans that are willing to pay. Because this black market's probably not the right word, but this whole economy that sits underneath this, that's not happening through traditional and official means, will just continue to exist, and it might change the way people get it, but they'll find a way rather than having to commit something that they don't feel comfortable committing to. So it's a rock and a hard place, but I really just hope Sky hasn't only just worked this out, because it's been a problem for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, you took the words out of my mouth. The Fire Stick is a symptom. It's not the illness. It's not, if you take away the Fire Stick, to your point, the reason why piracy has always been kind of a problem is the pirates are typically one step ahead. Whatever you've tried to take away with, whether it's watermarking, whether it's this, that, or the other, they're always a step ahead. And even the individual, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, he gave a presentation at a Sports Pro event, and he put up, an image, and he said, which of these two is a pirated site versus which one of these is the owned and operated platform. And it was just, the pirates are just so far ahead that, all right, say you want to get rid of the dodgy Fire Stick. All right, well, 3 other solutions will pop up. And again, you're trying to cure individual symptoms without actually, you're trying to put a Band-Aid on something that needs full-blown surgery sort of thing. And I just find it interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, even that example you're talking about there is an example where that was people actually paying a subscription to a pirated service to get access, which is a whole nother ballgame. What we're talking about in general terms is piracy can be as simple as you click a link and go to a website and it's available. So that there's so many issues around piracy that is not going to be solved unless the approach is different, like we've seen with entertainment, like we've seen with music. And I don't know how to get there, but I'm hoping that the stuff we've been covering around advertising is going to be one of the major enablers of that over the course of time. I don't know how quickly it'll take to get there, but I do think those things will have a meaningful impact against piracy and just create more of a truer economy around sports that reflects what everyone believes its value is really in the eyes of the fan.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, I appreciate you taking the time to join us. Nick and I have a very busy schedule coming up with StreamTime content of new things that are coming up, obviously with the New York event as well. We'll get the opportunities to speak to some people on the ground there. So, like I said, it's been a good year so far. We're officially in March, which is crazy, Nick. It doesn't feel like the holidays weren't that far apart, but lots of exciting content coming up over the next couple of weeks and months. And to the same point, if you've enjoyed the content you've been getting, please do take a look at the StreamTime membership that Nick mentioned at the top, because like you said, we want to continue to serve you as best we can.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Chris. Thanks everyone for listening in. And for those that are coming to the New York event in a couple of weeks' time, make sure you reach out to me. We'd love to see you in person. Thanks, everyone. Now, before you go, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to rate and review and just let me know what you think on social. You can find me on most social platforms as Sports Pro Nick. And please do spread the word of the podcast. There's no better way of marketing than word of mouth, whether that be in person or on social media. And if you don't like what you've heard, or you think we should be doing more or less of something, then reach out and let me know, as I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, StreamTimers. Until next time.